Chapter 4 focuses on youth sport. Youth sports are generally defined as 8th grade and younger. Socialization is the process of learning and adapting to a given social system and culture. Functionalist theorists love sport because they see it as a way for children to learn social roles like responsible neighbor, loyal friend, and proud citizen. Key socialization agents include family, parents and siblings, uncles, grandparents, peers, coaches, schools, religious institutions, as well as media. As a reminder from last chapter, social values help us understand and behave appropriately in our culture. Therefore, socialization into values like hard work, dedication, persistence attempt to create social order, continuity, and predictability. Because everyone shares the same ideas of right and wrong, therefore, there's an expectation of behavior. There are two primary factors that have led to the rise of youth sport. The first is the idea that sport has been used to teach, or can be used to teach personal and social skills like punctuality, respecting authority, and following rules. And organizations that now have become privatized can generate a lot of revenue. So sport has become less about informal games in which you play pickup in your backyard to very structured activities in which practices and games and competitions are scheduled, and the coach runs the organization and teaches these values and skills. According to the research, there are several factors that lead young athletes to have strong, positive experiences in sport. The first is frequent and intense involvement, meaning that there are consistent games and practices that they attend and enjoy. The second, voluntary participation, meaning that they want to be there and their parents or family isn't forcing them to. In addition, having a positive impression of the coach as someone who is knowledgeable about the sport and allows participants to express themselves. Scholars have identified two different forms of play, peer organized versus adult organized, and there are some differences in the way sports are organized at the youth level based on who is in charge. In adult organized setting, it's very professionalized, meaning they wear uniforms, they are treated like little professional athletes. Coaches have a majority of the control and they're very inflexible about scheduling practice times, games, and what they're doing in those sessions. In addition, youth athletes don't get input on the process, what they can do in practices, how the strategy should look in games. In comparison, in peer organized settings, informal norms regulate the games, and this means that children try to pick teams that result in competitive games. They decide on rules like boundaries and how many goals can be scored and how they score those goals. The process of actually playing the games themselves also differs. In peer organized games, children want to play right away, so they get organized quickly, set on complaints, rules, and challenges to get back into the action. In comparison, adult organized games focus more on order and respecting authority like referees and coaches through discipline. So when students stop listening or they do something wrong in practice, practice is often stopped and the athlete is penalized or the team is penalized. The final area of research in terms of adult organized versus peer organized focuses on the impetus, which means the reasons why they play or participate in the sport. In peer organized groups, children play because they had fun. They can also stop when they get bored and want to do something else. Unfortunately, in adult organized youth sport, children play because they have practices or games scheduled and their parents want them to be there. So they don't get really an opportunity to stop playing if they get bored or they don't like the session, they have to stay. So in terms of what these results actually mean, in peer organized sport, the process is important. Creating and enforcing rules, having fun, negotiating and compromising all leads to the development of interpersonal skills among young athletes. In comparison, in the adult organized framework, athletes become dependent on authority to make decisions, to create activities, to decide strategies, so they don't get to develop these skills that are really important as you grow older in life. This section will focus on the multitude of problems that have emerged with the professionalization of youth sport. Due to government cutbacks, sport has moved into the private realm, so there are fewer low-cost parks and rec programs as well as free programs of sport or after-school programs at the middle school, junior high, and elementary school level. So instead, more expensive private and elite organizations have taken over the youth sport market. The problem with this is that these expensive organizations reproduce inequalities, so people with less money don't have the opportunities or the resources in which to join these clubs. In addition, public parks have decided to lease out their facilities, so people in the neighborhoods that want to go use the facilities may not be able to because now they're taken over by a private, elite, expensive organization in which they don't have the funds to access. The second area is the risk of injury. So when young people start participating or focusing on one sport at a young age, they may end up developing overuse or repetitive use injuries that prevent them from continuing on, or it may lead to an expensive surgery to correct that injury, which may affect their quality of life later on. So parent involvement in youth sport is reaching its peak. Parents pay a lot of money for those elite clubs and they want to get a result in return on their investment. So there's a lot of high expectations about what the club should deliver, and which creates a lot of pressure on young athletes. Oftentimes this plays out in abusive behavior towards other parents, towards coaches, towards referees. There's a study that was done where 84% of participants in that study had witnessed someone acting violently on the sideline or during a youth sport game. So when that behavior, that background anger is happening, youth athletes on the field actually engage in higher unsportsmanlike behavior well. So it has a number of different impacts on young athletes. This value, winning at all costs, is based on the sport ethic, in which participants are encouraged to develop technical skills in order to progress to higher levels of achievement. In addition, fun is defined as becoming a better athlete, being more competitive, and being promoted into highly skilled training categories. So in this, winning is the primary component, and you need to improve your skills all the time in order to get there. There are a few ways youth sport can be improved so that the problems that I just discussed will ideally become less of an issue. So the first suggestion to increase the action gets at providing legitimate physical activity to reduce obesity, and sometimes in youth sport that's not the case when the same 6 kids play the entire time and your other 6 kids sit on the bench, so they're not actually getting any physical activity. So increase action through bigger goals, smaller teams, and fewer rules so that there's more physically involved in the game, and ideally it will create closer games which would be more exciting for the athletes. And next, increasing personal involvement speaks to the idea, like in the peer organized youth sport, where they get opportunities to implement different types of activities or drills during practices, strategies, maybe policing the games more themselves than the referees. So there's more investment in them from the games, which they have a little bit more ownership over. And the third is to educate coaches. So educate your coaches about different types of injuries, how to treat athletes, how to work with young people. So if someone doesn't have an education background, they may not know how to teach an 8-year-old how to kick a soccer ball. So trying to get coaches educated on how to deal with children in different developmental cycles is important. 2 final recommendations for improving youth sport are: 1, to hold parents accountable, so engaging in violent and abusive behavior towards other players, parents, coaches, and referees is unacceptable, and some organizations have implemented a parent code of conduct in which children are not allowed to play until their parents sign the form, and if the parent steps over a line and engages in that behavior, their child would actually get suspended. So that helps police the parents into engaging in appropriate behavior on the sidelines. And then finally, playing cooperative games may help maintain friendships. You can involve players in strategies and foster relationships with opponents, so it's not all about competition and winning, it's about working with other people. Youth sports have the capability of socializing young people into the core values of American society, like competition, hard work, persistence, and determination. Though there are differences in outcomes from peer organized sports, which are primarily informal pickup games, to adult organized sports, which are highly formalized, structured activities, in that young people are able to learn and practice different leadership and communication skills in the informal settings where they're more dependent on adults in the formal settings. Unfortunately, there's been a downside to commercialized, highly organized youth sport, primarily that athletes may end up getting burned out, injured, or abused, and thus dropping out of sport and being severely impacted the rest of their lives.